Coming up this week, we take a look at the history of public opinion polling in America. Are the numbers for presidential approval ratings and other public opinion polls even remotely accurate? Also this week, amongst a league of Chicago social reformers, Alice Hamilton spoke out against the silent killers in American industry. Learn about the woman who cleaned up America's dirty work. And you watch it all the time, but do you know how it started? This week, we take a look at the little-known origin and history behind broadcast television. All that and more on your Saturday Evening Post Week in Review.
Hello everyone and welcome to your Saturday Evening Post Week in Review. My name is Chris Wakefield. I am the marketing manager for the Saturday Evening Post web.
I'm Nicholas Gilmore. I'm a staff writer for the Post.
Troy Brownfield, also a staff writer.
So much to get to this week, but really cool, our newest issue is now out. Our March-April 2019 issue of the Saturday Evening Post is out. If you're a subscriber, it will be in your mailbox pretty soon or in your inbox. Also, with a great cover piece on the 100th anniversary of the Grand Canyon National Park and a first-hand account of rafting through the Grand Canyon on the Colorado River. Really great piece. Check it out. If you are not a subscriber, you can subscribe at SaturdayEveningPost.com/subscribe. You get 6 of these bad boys every single year, unlimited access to our online archives, exclusive member benefits, and so much more. SaturdayEveningPost.com/subscribe. Go pick up our latest issue. All right, let's start with a piece that Jeff Nielsen has over at SaturdayEveningPost.com that talks about the history, Troy, of public opinion polling in America.
Well, 66% of the people at this table have read the piece. It's really interesting. Look, because and we were talking about this earlier, the fact that you see these opinion polls like Gallup, Rasmussen, and so forth referred to on the news, and a lot of people don't understand the methodology by which the opinions are collected. And as Nick pointed out, a lot of people think that it's still being done just on landlines until just a few years ago it was. And now they are actually calling cell phones, which gives you a wider range of the population. But a lot of the polling places still kind of pick out ahead of time who they want to target, which changes your answers.
And that, we call that sampling. And you're trying to find, ideally, a good mix of people from all different backgrounds and demographics. But you've discovered that it's not always what it seems to be. It's not always a 1-to-1 ratio, so to speak.
And I remember in the 2016 election, checking the polls like probably every day.
I was hourly.
There was a time when Hillary had a pretty wide margin on Trump, leading him. But then I also remember a few days before the election, or maybe day of, whatever, that it wasn't a very big margin.
Well, something happened a few days before the election.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, I remember seeing that, and then everyone was very surprised that the polls were,
right,
so wrong. But as Jeff points out in that article, they really weren't wrong.
And
they were within their margin of error.
It's kind of revisionist because if you ask people now, what did the polls say? A lot of people will tell you, oh, they said Hillary would win. They didn't really. The polls closed as what's called a margin of error. And I think any rational person doesn't expect a poll to be on point to the exact percentage. That's why polls have a 3 to 4% margin of error, and that's exactly what ended up happening.
But if you remember Nate Silver giving that, was it 97, 99% chance
he didn't.
Hillary would win?
He did.
He did
the day before
of the night.
No.
It slowly went down.
So that's what they have during. That was their first time doing a live poll of that sort. That's their formula, their algorithm tries to calculate it as results come in. That was their first time using that. That day, that morning, he predicted, I think it was Hillary having a 60 or 65% chance of winning, is what he was saying. Then as those polls come in from different key counties, before Michigan and Wisconsin came through, the formula, and they do this with sports games too, as you watch a sports game unfold, it's okay, it's 50 to 35, that means X team has a 70% chance to win this game. So it's kind of a live...
Kind of the irony of the polling when it came to the election, though, is that you have to look at the fact that it was fairly accurate when it came to the popular vote.
Yes.
And so the polling was accounting for the popular. The polling was not accounting for the way that the electoral fell out. So
right.
It's still going to be, that plus or minus. It's still going to be, if we're going by the popular vote, Hillary wins. If we're going by the electoral vote, Trump wins. And so that's something that's not really accounted for in the polling as far as.
Tell us what you think. Podcast at SaturdayEveningPost.com. Send us your thoughts, and then go read Jeff Nielsen's piece at SaturdayEveningPost.com. Now, Nick, let's switch gears. You have a piece out this week over on the website about the woman who helped clean up America's dirty work. I love that title.
Yeah, so this is Alice Hamilton.
Alexander Hamilton.
Alice Hamilton, who had there's a 150th anniversary of her birth this week, and she was pretty instrumental in laying the groundwork for OSHA, a lot of labor protections that happened in the early century and throughout the 20th century. And so a lot of people when they think of labor protections and that sort of era of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, a lot of people think of worksite accidents and long work hours, child labor, but the very dangerous, immediate dangers of work. And so what Alice Hamilton did was go in and look at chemical poisoning in lead factories, steel mills, mines, places like that, to find kind of the more insidious, slow killers in industry that was going.
And again, one of those people who have changed the way we work in America today and changed the lives of countless people through her actions years ago.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you think about this because you have people even now who, when people talk about they're big fans of deregulation and there's too much government interference and so forth. Well, they all often fail to take into account a lot of these regulations were just focused on protecting people in negative situations.
Keeping you alive.
Coal mining and, the things that, Nick's talking about in the article, the things like businesses that involve health and so forth. These are regulations, but they're really simple, common sense steps in a lot of ways. They're just made to keep people alive or not get sick.
Right.
And you're talking about water and so forth.
For Alice Hamilton, she didn't despise, industrialists, businessmen, factory managers. She liked them a lot and had a lot of respect for people like that, but she also, pretty deeply distrusted that they were able to self-regulate. Just because of what she saw,
Which,
going
yeah,
around the country,
it turned out to be true. And
interviewing immigrants who were very cheap labor, and people like that.
I think what happens now is we see a story of the guy who cleans the sidewalk has to wear a harness and a vest and a cable. It's run amok, but I think you have to look at the full picture of how far we've come to things that might be isolated and a bit ridiculous to where we were when she started her work. So go over to SaturdayEveningPost.com and read Nick's piece on Alice Hamilton. Our next piece at SaturdayEveningPost.com comes from Troy about the history and the journey of broadcast television. First, Troy, I feel like a lot of younger people, millennials, may not know. What do you mean when you say broadcast television?
Well, back in the day, the 80s, we had over-the-air broadcast television. It wasn't until just a few years ago that they stopped doing the traditional over-the-air and made you go to digital or else digital antennas to receive material. But, going back into the early days of radio and so forth, everything was just, antenna-based. And then with the invention of, old school coaxial cable, they were able to, over vast distances, link individual radio stations together, creating networks. Well, then, as they went along and they started bringing in TV stations, then they started to link those stations together. So you had the radio networks beginning in the 20s, and then the TV networks starting as early as the 1940s. And, back then, there were 4 major networks. And you had...
ESPN.
That's right. No. You had NBC, which originally was 2 networks, Red and Blue, and one of those was spun off and became ABC. You had CBS, and then you had the Dumont network, which was which didn't start as a radio network. It started as an original television network, and it ran for only about 10 years. But it had a lot of innovations. Your first sitcom, your first sci-fi show, all these different things that happened. You also had first minority leads of 2 different programs from the Dumont network, and then eventually through a whole series of things, Dumont ends up kind of getting absorbed and goes away. And then we have what we call the Big 3.
Right.
of ABC, CBS, and NBC, and that was until 1986. Fox didn't go on the air as the fourth network until 1986. So this piece kind of looks at how those things happen, how they kind of evolved out of radio, and in a way it's a sequel to an earlier piece I did that was about the very first networked broadcast and how these things actually work.
The Tiffany Network, they called CBS.
Right,
The
and
Tiffany Network.
part of that was because William Paley was really invested in doing a lot of different programming, like quality programs, actually putting symphony on the air and so forth. And so they said, well, this is like the diamond standard, so hence the Tiffany nickname.
Go read Troy's piece over at SaturdayEveningPost.com. It's maybe apocryphal, but I read somewhere the first ever, when Fox first comes on the air, the first show that come on the air for Fox was
I don't know. That's a good one.
Married with Children.
Oh, yeah, Married with Children was on the original slate. They had a bunch of sitcoms and some half-hour dramas. There was a horror action show called Werewolf that was actually really good. There was a show called Duet that got turned into a show later called Open House. It was Ellen DeGeneres' first gig.
Oh.
She played the receptionist in this real estate firm, and so there were a bunch of these. And 21 Jump Street was one of Fox's first dramas as well.
Again, go over to SaturdayEveningPost.com and read Troy's piece. Now it is time for my favorite part of the week. We call it Don't At Me. Things this week that may be pissing us off, getting under our skin, getting under us a little bit. We got strong opinions about it. We don't want to hear yours. We just want to vent. Troy, you got one for this week?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you talk about it. We've talked about, we've joked about it, the whole millennials and their phones kind of things. But for a piece coming up in the magazine, I talked to therapist and author Lisa Gottlieb, and she talks about the fact that this focus on phones and devices is not just a teen thing, a millennial thing. It's all age groups, and that it is kind of a problem with interaction. That a lot of people are sacrificing real conversation, real community for kind of the, not necessarily fake, but kind of the unreal community of online and social media. And that it is actually creating problems in relationships and marriages and so forth because people are interacting, solely online or through their phones instead of having actual conversations. And so one of the things that she talks about is just kind of the benefit of having actual conversations. So, don't at me on the fact that, I'm not telling you to put your phones down like an old fogey. I'm telling you, engage in real conversation when you have the opportunity because it's actually beneficial.
I see this a lot with the pictures of people like, oh, look, they're all looking at their phones on the train and sort of talking to each other. And you go back 100 years and get a picture of people on the train and they're all with their heads stuck in the newspaper or in magazines.
Yeah. I'm not talking about public transit. I'm talking about when you sit
your
around
mom.
When you're at the dinner table and all four people at the dinner table have their head in their phone instead of having a conversation, because there's actually some real psychological benefit to within your family, within your friends talking instead of everybody being on a device.
I don't believe it. Nick, you got one for this week?
Well, you hate people.
Yeah, I was just chatting with my online girlfriend about this.
Who lives in Canada.
And
you wouldn't know her.
So I was disappointed. I was disappointed in the Cohen testimony.
Oh, you wanted more?
No, it was because whenever I listened, it was boring. I'm not gonna listen to an 8 hour, longer.
I'm so bored with all this presidential takedown.
Is that because you see so much in movies and TV, like the Howard Hughes fiery testimony or the Red Scare testimonies?
I wouldn't even say it was boring so much as just grating to listen to. All of these,
it was very difficult.
Did you order the code red, Nick?
What? No, I mean, sure there were tons of bombshells and whatnot, but no, I don't. Who could sit there and listen to this for 8 hours? Did you guys?
Yes.
Yeah, I listened to it all day while I was working.
What one change would you make to that format to make it more exciting or less boring?
Oh, I don't think it needs to be more exciting. I just don't understand how anyone can be excited over it.
Okay. So there's no...
I don't think we need to, as a country, be excited about things like that. I don't think that's something that we need.
Okay. But you're not going to watch it? If it happens again, you're not going to sit through it again?
I mean, no.
Okay.
Give me like an hour-long thing. Give me a press
conference. Condense it for Nick. I want to talk about real quick a woman who owns a series of cake bake shops, or small coffee shops rather, who penned a piece, an op-ed piece, and her name escapes me and the shop escapes me, probably for the better, upset that millennials are lazy because they don't want to work for her for free in these free internships. And more so, marketing and social media people who she wants to come work for her, they don't want to do it for free. And that's upsetting to
Where
her.
did she publish this?
Again, it escapes me. I should have checked before we started, but I didn't. But I'll link to it in the show notes over at SaturdayEveningPost.com. She's upset because people don't want to work for free. Millennials don't want to run her social media for free.
I don't even want to work for money.
As someone who runs social media for a living, I can tell you, one, it's not easy, and two, just pay people. People think it's easy, and they think it's low maintenance. Then you start doing it, and then something bad happens, and your brand is ruined in seconds. I'll tell this lady, you want to pay someone to do a top-notch job. Okay, one more time. You can subscribe to the Saturday Evening Post, SaturdayEveningPost.com/subscribe. A one-year subscription is only $15. You get a lot of benefits, unlimited access to our online archives, and 6 new issues of the Saturday Evening Post in your mailbox or your email inbox every single year for only $15. SaturdayEveningPost.com/subscribe. Nick, where can we find you online?
I am on Twitter at Darwin Jr. with a Y.
On Twitter at Troy Brownfield.
You can find the post everywhere at Saturday Evening Post. That's all we have this week from Meadowsville Brewing, and we'll see you all next week.